My husband told me he was moving to New York City for a 2-year corporate assignment. I saw him off in tears. But the second I got home, I transferred every single penny out of our joint bank account, $50,000. The very next day, I drove down to the county courthouse and filed for divorce. The terminal at Chicago O'Hare International Airport was packed with people. I gripped Mark's hand tightly, tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. "Mark, do you really have to go for 2 whole years?" I asked. My voice choked with emotion. Mark gently wiped away my tears. His voice sounded reluctant, too. "Hannah, you know how crucial this project is for my career. 2 years will fly by. I'll FaceTime you every day. I'm going to miss you so much." I buried my face in his chest, and he patted my back softly. "Silly girl, I'll miss you too. But this is a massive opportunity for our future. When I come back, we'll have enough money to put a down payment on a house in a really nice suburb." The boarding announcement echoed through the concourse. Mark kissed my forehead deeply. "Wait for me." I stood paralyzed, watching his back disappear through the TSA security checkpoint until my vision blurred with tears. Travelers rushed past me in every direction. No one paid any attention to the woman crying in the corner. I dried my eyes with a tissue, took a deep breath, and turned to walk out of the airport. In the back of the Uber, I leaned my head against the window, watching the familiar streets of Chicago blur by. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Saying goodbye to someone?" I nodded without saying a word, looking completely heartbroken. "Boyfriend or husband?" "My husband," I replied softly. The driver sighed. "It's tough for young couples to have to live apart for work. But don't worry, a good man always comes back home." I managed a weak smile but didn't reply. The car pulled up to our condo building in Lincoln Park. I tipped the driver on the app and walked into the home Mark and I had shared. The empty apartment echoed with my footsteps. I paused in the entryway, looking at the slippers he had left by the door, and a bitter laugh escaped my lips. I kicked off my heels, walked barefoot into the living room, and collapsed onto the couch. I pulled my phone out of my purse and opened my Chase Bank app. The balance on our joint checking account read, exactly $50,482.17. It was our entire life savings from 5 years of marriage. My paycheck was direct deposited in there, every single month. Mark always said it was better for our financial planning. I never questioned it because I trusted him. I trusted our marriage. Until 3 days ago. That afternoon, I had gotten off work early and wanted to surprise Mark. As I walked toward his office building downtown, I saw him walking out of a corner coffee shop with another woman. She had her arm linked through his, and they were laughing intimately. I froze. Mark didn't see me. He walked her to the curb and hailed a yellow cab for her. Before she got in, Mark leaned down and kissed her on the lips. I hid behind a large oak tree, my heart squeezing as if it were in a vice. The pain completely knocked the wind out of me. When the cab drove off, Mark turned around and headed back toward his building. I didn't confront him. That night, Mark walked through the door acting completely normal. "Hannah, I'm so sorry, long meeting at the office. Have you eaten?" He walked over and kissed my cheek naturally. I suppressed the physical urge to pull away. "I already ate," I said, forcing a smile. "I left a plate for you in the oven. You're the best, honey." He smiled and went to the kitchen to heat up his dinner. I sat in the living room, staring at his back as he moved around, and suddenly, he looked like a complete stranger. After dinner, he brought it up casually. "Oh, by the way, Hannah. The company has a massive new project launching in New York City. They want me to lead it. I might have to be based out of Manhattan for 2 years." My hand trembled, and I almost knocked over my glass of water. 2 years? That's a really long time. Yeah, it's a long-term project, but it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. My boss said if I nail this, I'm guaranteed a VP promotion when I get back. His eyes were shining with excitement. "What about me?" I asked, my voice small. Mark walked over and wrapped his arm around my shoulders. You keep working here in Chicago. I'll send you money every month for expenses. 2 years will be over before you know it. When I get back, we'll be set for life. I leaned my head on his shoulder and closed my eyes. Tears silently slid down my cheeks. In that exact moment, everything clicked. He wasn't moving to New York for a project. He was moving to New York with that woman. The corporate assignment was nothing but an elaborate lie. The next day, I took a personal day from work. I needed the truth. I hired a private investigator recommended by a college sorority sister. His name was Kevin Vance, a professional, reliable guy in his late 30s. All right, Miss Miller. What exactly do you need me to look into? He asked as we sat across from each other in a quiet local cafe. I told him everything, including the scene I had witnessed. Kevin nodded. I understand. In these cases, if there's infidelity, there's always a paper trail. Give me a week. You'll have a full report. Thank you. I stood up to leave. Miss Miller, Kevin called out. Sometimes the truth can be brutal. Are you prepared for what I might find? I gave him a stiff smile. No matter how brutal it is, I need to know. For the next few days, I lived a lie. I went to work, came home, cooked for Mark, and we chatted about our days. On the outside, we were the same loving couple, but my heart was completely dead. Mark was busy preparing for his move, booking flights, packing his bags, handling corporate housing paperwork. He was entirely absorbed in the excitement of his new life, completely oblivious to the shift in me. A week later, Kevin met me at the same cafe. He handed me a thick manila envelope. Miss Miller, here is the report. I took a deep breath and opened it. Inside was a thick stack of photographs and documents. Every single image was a knife to my chest. Mark and the woman holding hands while shopping on the Magnificent Mile. Mark and the woman checking into the Thompson Hotel. Mark and the woman having an intimate dinner at a high-end steakhouse. My hands were shaking. Kevin's voice seemed to echo from far away. Her name is Claire Sutton. She's the new marketing director at your husband's firm. They started seeing each other 3 months ago. According to my investigation, your husband is indeed transferring to New York. But not just for work. He and Miss Sutton are relocating together. He's already closed on a luxury condo in Brooklyn, and the down payment was wired directly from your joint account. The room started spinning. Are you okay? Do you need some water? Kevin asked with genuine concern. I waved him off, forcing myself to calm down, and kept reading. The file included printed screenshots of their text messages. Claire, just a little longer. Once I have Hannah settled, we can finally be together out in the open. Mark, I'm counting down the days, babe. Plus, you've already moved most of the cash from the joint account. She's just one woman. What can she really do? Claire, that's true. Her whole paycheck has gone into that account for years. I've been the one investing it. She barely has any personal savings. She won't be able to afford a fight after the divorce. Mark, so when are you going to tell her? Claire, I don't have to. I'll move to New York first. After 6 months, I'll tell her I met someone out here and that I want a divorce. That way, she won't make a scene. Since I'll be the one initiating it from out of state, she'll look crazy if she fights it. Mark, you have it all figured out. So, when do we start decorating our Brooklyn place? Claire. As soon as I land. Don't worry, we're going to have a beautiful life. I closed the file, shut my eyes, and took a deep, shuddering breath. 5 years of marriage. It had all been a meticulously planned scam. Miss Miller, what are you going to do? Kevin asked, handing me a glass of water. I opened my eyes, my gaze stone cold. I am going to transfer every last cent out of that joint account. It's a joint account. Legally, I have full access to those funds, I said with a dark chuckle. Besides, the vast majority of that money came from my salary. He thinks I'm some idiot who's going to sit here waiting for him to come back and dump me. He's dreaming. Kevin nodded. I understand. If you need legal counsel, I can recommend a phenomenal divorce attorney. Thank you, I'll need it. Leaving the cafe, I didn't go home. I went straight to the nearest Chase branch. The teller was visibly surprised by the amount I wanted to wire. Ma'am, this is a very substantial sum. Are you absolutely sure you want to transfer the entire balance? I'm sure. Into my personal account. All right. Please enter your PIN. I punched in the numbers and watched the screen blink. Transfer successful. A massive wave of relief washed over me. $50,000. All safely in my personal account. It was what I deserved. It was my blood, sweat, and tears from the last 5 years. When I got home, Mark wasn't back yet. I sat on the sofa and started piecing together the last 5 years. We met through a mutual friend. I had just graduated from college and was working as a copywriter at a small ad agency. Mark was 3 years older, already a project manager at a multinational tech firm. He was mature, stable, and charming. He pursued me relentlessly, flowers, gifts. Picking me up from work every single day. He said he fell in love the second he saw me, that I was the most genuine, kind-hearted girl he had ever met. I bought into his sweet words and agreed to be his girlfriend. A year later, we got married. The wedding wasn't lavish, but it was warm and beautiful. I truly thought I had found the man I was going to spend the rest of my life with. Our married life seemed happy. Mark treated me well. We had dinner together every night and went out on weekends. I thought this was just what marriage was supposed to be, but looking back now, there were so many red flags I had ignored. Mark always insisted I deposit my paycheck into the joint account for wealth management, but I never saw a single bank statement in all those years. I had no idea where the money was actually going. He often came home late, claiming he was working. But when I called him, I would hear background noise like a bar or a restaurant. He was always indifferent toward my family. He always found excuses to avoid visiting my parents for Thanksgiving or Christmas, claiming he was slammed with work, but he miraculously always had time for his frat brothers. He would just tell me he was stressed, that he was an introvert. I made up 1,000 excuses to convince myself I was in a happy marriage. Now I saw it clearly. It was a complete joke. At 8 p.m., Mark walked in. "Hannah, I'm home." He kissed my cheek just like always. I swallowed my disgust and smiled. "Hey, did you eat?" "Yeah, team dinner at the office," he said, taking off his suit jacket. "By the way, my flight is the day after tomorrow. I just need to wrap up some loose ends at work." "So soon?" I faked a look of shock. "Yeah, the timeline on this project is super tight." He sat on the couch. "Hannah, while I'm gone these next 2 years, take good care of yourself. Don't go spending money crazily." I almost burst out laughing. He was planning to run off with our entire life savings, and he had the sheer audacity to tell me not to spend money. "I won't," I said, lowering my eyes. "Mark, take care of yourself in New York." "Too. Of course I will." He took my hand. "When I get back, we'll buy that big house with the picket fence we always wanted, and then we'll have a baby." A baby. A baby with Claire, probably. I just smiled and didn't say a word. That night, we slept in the same bed we always did, but I didn't sleep a wink. The man laying next to me was about to run off with our life savings and his mistress, and I still had to play my part. The next day, I went to work as usual. During my lunch break, I called the lawyer Kevin had recommended. "Hi, Kevin Vance referred me. I need a consultation for a divorce. Of course, tell me a bit about your situation." Her voice was sharp, professional, and reassuring. I laid it all out. After listening, the attorney, Miss Davis, said, "Based on what you've told me, your husband has committed adultery and is actively attempting to dissipate marital assets. Your move to transfer the money from the joint account to your personal account was entirely legal, as it is community property and you have equal right to access those funds. So, if I file for divorce right now, what can I expect? I asked. First, depending on the state laws we leverage and the extent of the marital fraud, we can push for a disproportionate share of the remaining assets due to his fault in the breakdown of the marriage. Second, in the division of property, since you can prove the vast majority of the cash originated from your income, we have a strong argument. Furthermore, because your husband used marital funds to purchase real estate in New York, that Brooklyn condo is absolutely subject to asset division. Her analysis gave me a crystal clear path forward. What documents do I need to prep? Your marriage certificate, social security numbers, tax returns, proof of the infidelity, a list of assets, bank statements, etc. You can start gathering those, and we'll set up an in-person meeting to go over the strategy. After hanging up, I immediately got to work. Our marriage certificate and social security cards were in a file cabinet at home. Kevin had already provided all the evidence of the affair. I could print out the bank statements online. I had everything I needed. On my commute home, my mom called. "Hannah, I heard Mark is moving to New York for work." "Yeah, Mom. His company is relocating him," I said calmly. "What about you? Will you be okay by yourself?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. "I'll be fine, Mom. I'm a grown woman. I can take care of myself, but 2 years is a long time. Maybe you should just move with him." "Mom, my career is here in Chicago. I can't just drop everything. Plus, he's going for a work project, not moving there permanently. It wouldn't make sense for me to uproot my life." My mom sighed. "I suppose you're right. Just take good care of yourself, sweetie. Call me if you need anything." "I will, Mom." When I hung up, I smiled bitterly. She couldn't even fathom how shattered she would be if she knew I was about to go through a messy divorce. But I had no regrets. It was better to pull the plug on a dead marriage than to suffer inside one. When I got to the apartment, Mark was packing his bags, one massive suitcase stuffed with designer clothes and toiletries. "Hannah, come check if I'm forgetting anything," he called out. I walked over and glanced inside. "Looks like you've got everything." "Great." He zipped it up. "I fly out tomorrow. Let's go have a really nice dinner tonight. A little farewell date." "Sounds perfect." I forced a smile. We went to an upscale steakhouse downtown. It was the same restaurant where we had our first anniversary. Mark ordered a pricey Cabernet, bone-in ribeyes, and my favorite tiramisu. "Hannah, these next 2 years are going to be tough on you," he said, raising his wine glass. "When I get back, I'll make it all up to you." I raised my glass and clinked it against his. "I'll be waiting." The wine tasted bittersweet, exactly like our marriage. Sweet on the surface, incredibly bitter underneath. "Oh, after I leave, if you need money for anything, just pull it from the joint account," Mark said casually. "I made sure to leave plenty in there for you." I practically choked on my steak. There was exactly $482 left in that account, and he had the nerve to say he left plenty. "Okay, I will," I said, slicing my meat. "Hannah." Suddenly, Mark reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "I know you're going to be lonely these next 2 years, but you have to wait for me. We have a rock-solid foundation. We can get through this." I looked into his eyes, which were brimming with seemingly genuine emotion. If I hadn't seen the detective's file, I would have fallen for it all over again. "I'll wait for you," I lied flawlessly. We got home late. Mark had too much to drink and spent the entire Uber ride rambling about our future. He talked about moving to a bigger house in the suburbs, taking a second honeymoon to Hawaii, and having a baby. Listening to him, I felt nothing but pure irony. He was probably going to fulfill every single one of those promises with Claire. I was just a stepping stone he was ready to discard. The morning I drove Mark to O'Hare, I applied heavier makeup than usual, intentionally using dark eyeshadow so my crying would look more dramatic. Mark dragged his suitcase, and I clung to his arm. We looked just like any other deeply in love couple acting out a heartbreaking goodbye. Hannah, don't cry. 2 years will fly by, he said, wiping my tears. I know. I just can't bear to see you go, I sobbed. Silly. He hugged me. Take care of yourself. I'll FaceTime you all the time. I buried my face in his chest, letting my tears soak his expensive dress shirt. It was time to board. Mark gave me one last, lingering kiss. Wait for me. I'll be waiting, I said, offering a trembling smile. I stood there, watching him walk through TSA, his figure getting smaller and smaller until he disappeared into the crowd. The airport was full of goodbyes. Some people were crying, others were laughing. No one had any idea what was actually going through the mind of the woman who looked the most devastated of them all. I wiped my face dry and walked away from the terminal. In the rideshare back to the city, I checked the time on my phone. It was 10 a.m. The courthouse was open, but I was in no rush. I had the driver drop me off at home first. Once inside, I took a long, hot shower, scrubbed all the makeup off my face, and put on a simple, clean navy blue wrap dress that made me look dignified and put together. I sat at my vanity, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The naive girl from 5 years ago was dead. In her place was a woman with cold determination in her eyes. I grabbed my phone and texted Kevin, keep an eye on Mark's movements after he lands at JFK. His reply came instantly, copy that. Then, I texted my lawyer, Miss Davis, I will be at your office at 2 p.m. She replied, perfect, see you then. With everything arranged, I grabbed my tote bag. Inside were all the necessary documents, our marriage certificate, my driver's license, the bank cards, and Kevin's PI report. At 11 a.m., I walked out the door. The Cook County Courthouse wasn't too far away, maybe a 20-minute walk. I decided to go on foot one final stroll to mark the end of this chapter of my life. The Chicago streets were bustling, everyone wrapped up in their own daily grind. No one noticed the woman marching toward the courthouse to terminate a 5-year marriage. The courthouse lobby was relatively quiet. I walked straight up to the clerk's desk. Excuse me, I need to file for divorce. The clerk looked up. Is this an uncontested or contested divorce? Contested, I stated firmly. All right, you'll need to file a formal petition with the court first. Once a judge reviews it and issues a summons, you can proceed with the formal filings, she explained. I paused. I had assumed I could just sign a paper and be done with it. What do I need to file the petition? The clerk handed me a packet. Just follow the checklist on the front page. I took the packet and scanned it. I had brought everything on the list. Thank you. I turned and walked out of the building. I had oversimplified things in my head. Divorce in the US isn't just declaring you want one, it's a grueling legal battlefield. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. Miss Davis, I just went to the courthouse. They said I have to file a formal petition first. That's correct. Since your husband is out of state, and you are alleging fault and dissipation of assets, we can't just push through a quick mutual agreement. We have to litigate this, Miss Davis said. Come to my office this afternoon, and we'll draft the petition and map out our strategy. Got it. Hanging up, I stood on the courthouse steps, watching people cycle in and out of the heavy glass doors. Some were smiling, holding hands, going in for a marriage license. Others looked miserable, coming out to finalize a divorce. Marriage is like a fortress, I thought. Those on the outside want to break in, and those on the inside are desperate to break out. At 2 p.m. sharp, I was sitting in Miss Davis's downtown law office. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s. She offered me a seat and a bottle of water. Miss Miller, I've reviewed the file you sent over. Your case is a bit complex, she began. First, your husband is residing out of state, which makes serving him with papers slightly more tedious, though we can use a process server in New York. Second, regarding the asset division, we are going to aggressively subpoena the real estate records for the property he purchased in Brooklyn. I understand, I nodded. How long do you think this will take? If everything goes relatively smoothly, about 6 months. If he fights us or refuses to cooperate, it could drag out longer. I can wait 6 months. Let's file immediately, I said. Excellent. Miss Davis slid a thick document across the mahogany desk. This is a draft of the petition. Read it over. And let me know if anything needs adjusting. I read it line by line. The petition meticulously detailed Mark's marital misconduct, including his ongoing infidelity and his fraudulent transfer of marital assets to purchase out-of-state property. It's perfect. Where do I sign? Right here. We will file this with the court tomorrow morning, Miss Davis said. And regarding the fact that you emptied the joint account, keep that completely under wraps for now. If he finds out, he might try to preemptively hide other assets. Understood, I said. No one knows but you and me. Walking out of her firm, I felt lighter. The road to divorce was going to be long, but I had officially taken the first step. When I got home, I started packing up all of Mark's remaining belongings, his clothes, his books, his framed photos. Every single object had been a pillar of my reality, but now looking at them just made me nauseous. I shoved everything into cardboard boxes, intending to FedEx them to his parents' house in Ohio. Let them see exactly what kind of son they raised. While I was taping up a box, my phone buzzed. It was FaceTime. Mark. I took a deep breath, plastered on a smile, and answered. Hey! Hannah, I just landed at JFK, Mark's voice rang out, buzzing with excitement. Oh, good flight? I kept my voice light and steady. Great flight. Weather is amazing here, but the cab ride into the city is brutal. How was your day? Did you cry a lot? He teased. I'm surviving, I said. Get some rest, Hannah. I love you. I let a few seconds of silence pass before I replied, me too. I hung up, looked at the call log, and scoffed. He said he loved me, but what he really loved was having a gullible, naive wife who would happily hand over her paycheck every month. He never loved the real me. For the next few days, I went to work as usual, and every night I continued purging the apartment. I boxed up the last of his things and scheduled the freight pickup. I rearranged the furniture and threw out every single picture of us together. The condo slowly morphed into a space that belonged solely to me. Without his suffocating presence, I felt a profound sense of freedom. 5 days later, Miss Davis called. Miss Miller, the petition has been filed, and the judge has reviewed it. That was fast, I said, genuinely surprised. Your documentation was bulletproof, so it sailed through the initial clerk review, she explained. The court is issuing a summons. We've hired a process server in New York to hand-deliver it to him at his corporate office. Once served, he has a strict statutory window to file a legal response. If he ignores it, we request a default judgment and win everything. Perfect. Keep me posted. I hung up, exhaling a long breath. Everything was falling perfectly into place. That evening, Mark FaceTimed me again. On the screen, he was standing in an unfamiliar, ultra-modern living room with floor-to-ceiling windows showing the Manhattan skyline at sunset. Hannah, check it out, this is my new place in the city, Mark said, panning the camera around. Nice, right? I looked at the sleek luxury apartment, scoffing internally. It had to be the $1 million condo he bought with my money. It's gorgeous, I said. Are you living there all by yourself? Yeah, it's a 1-bedroom corporate apartment the firm hooked me up with, he lied without blinking. It feels a little empty, though. It would be perfect if you were here with me. I almost laughed out loud. He was literally standing in the apartment he was sharing with Claire, yet he was still putting on an Oscar-worthy performance. When you get back, we'll be together again, I said smoothly. Yeah, I'm going to miss you so much. When the call ended, I sat on the couch in a daze. The man's capacity for sociopathic lying was terrifying. If I hadn't seen the hard evidence with my own 2 eyes, he could have played me for a fool until the day I died. A week later, Kevin emailed me a new encrypted file. It contained high-res photos of Mark and Claire in New York. They were grocery shopping at Whole Foods, walking a dog in Central Park, getting brunch in Soho. They looked exactly like a wealthy pair of newlyweds. There was also a photo of them walking into a luxury real estate brokerage. Kevin's attached note read, "They are looking at summer properties in the Hamptons, inquiring about taking out a mortgage under an LLC tied to your husband's new corporate entity." I forwarded everything directly to Miss Davis as supplemental evidence. When she saw the photos, she called me immediately. "With this, I am filing an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order to freeze his assets. We are going to legally block him from transferring, hiding, or purchasing any more real estate until the divorce is finalized." "Do it," I said coldly. "Don't worry, Miss Miller," Miss Davis said, her tone lethal. "I am going to make sure we extract every single dollar you are entitled to. Men like your husband need to be bled dry." I nodded to the empty room. Yes, he was going to pay. 2 weeks later, the New York process server successfully ambushed Mark outside his office building and handed him the court summons. That night, my phone blew up. When I finally answered, his voice was shaking with rage. "Hannah, are you out of your psychotic mind? Why the hell did you file for divorce?" "Because I know everything about Claire," I said, my voice eerily calm. Dead silence on the other end. "What? What are you talking about?" "I don't understand," Mark stammered, full-blown panic bleeding into his tone. "Drop the act, Mark," I sneered. "I know you're not in New York on a temporary assignment. I know you're living with Claire Sutton. I know you used our joint savings to close on a Brooklyn condo, and I know you never ever planned on coming back. Hannah, listen to me. Just let me explain." "I don't want your explanations," I cut him off. "I filed the papers. Have your lawyer call my lawyer. I'll see you in court." "How dare you?" His mask finally slipped, revealing the monster underneath. "You wired all the money out of the Chase account, didn't you? That is marital property. You had no legal right. The vast majority of that money was my salary. What's wrong with me securing my own wages?" I shot back. "And what about you? Buying out-of-state real estate behind my back with community property? That's fraud on the marital estate." Mark fell silent. "Hannah, you are going to deeply regret this," he threatened, his voice dropping an octave. "What do you honestly think you're going to get out of this divorce? I have the high-priced corporate lawyers. You're going to walk away with absolutely nothing." "We'll see about that," I said, and hung up. My hands were shaking. Even though I was prepared, the actual confrontation was still jarring. Over the next few days, Mark bombarded my phone, alternating between leaving pathetic, sobbing voicemails, begging for forgiveness, and sending venomous, threatening text messages. I ignored all of it. I poured all my energy into my job and preparing for trial. Miss Davis was an absolute shark. She helped me organize an ironclad mountain of evidence: the affair, the fraudulent wire transfers, the Brooklyn deed, and my pay stubs proving I had funded the joint account for 5 solid years. "Miss Miller, your case is exceptionally strong," she assured me in her office. "He is clearly the at-fault party, and his attempt to dissipate marital assets is egregious. The judge is going to throw the book at him." "Thank you, Miss Davis. It's what I do," she smiled. "Stay strong. We are in the home stretch." I nodded. I had to be strong. I was no longer the pushover I was 5 years ago. A month later, we had our hearing in the Dallas County Family Court. Mark had unsuccessfully tried to get the venue moved to New York. Mark didn't even have the guts to show up in person. He appeared via Zoom, represented by an arrogant Wall Street attorney. It was a bloodbath. Miss Davis systematically laid out every piece of evidence. Mark's lawyer tried to argue that the photos were circumstantial and that the Brooklyn condo was a business investment, but faced with Kevin's meticulous paper trail and the text messages, his arguments were laughed out of the room. The judge called a recess and stated that a final written judgment would be issued shortly. As we walked out of the courtroom, Miss Davis patted my shoulder. "You held up wonderfully in there, Hannah. Now we just wait for the check to clear." "Thank you for everything," I smiled. The day the final judgment arrived in the mail, Chicago was bathed in gorgeous spring sunlight. Miss Davis called me, practically glowing over the phone. "Hannah, the judge's order is in. We secured a total victory. The divorce is granted. Regarding the asset division, you are legally awarded 100% of the $50,000 you already withdrew from the joint account. Plus, you are awarded a cash payout equal to exactly half the equity of the Brooklyn property. Furthermore, he is ordered to pay your attorney's fees and an additional penalty for the fraudulent dissipation of assets." Hearing those words, I broke down in tears, not out of joy, but pure, unadulterated relief. I was finally free. "Thank you, Miss Davis." "Truly, thank you," I sobbed. "You earned this," she said gently. "Now, go live your life. Leave the trash in the past and start fresh." "I will." Hanging up the phone in my office, I looked out the window at the skyline. 5 years of marriage, officially erased. I always thought I'd be devastated if I ever got divorced. But in that moment, all I felt was profound liberation. That night, I went out for drinks with my closest friends. To Hannah's freedom. My best friend Sarah cheered, holding up her margarita. I clinked my glass against hers. "Thank you guys for keeping me sane through all this. That scumbag got exactly what he deserved," Emily said, her eyes flashing with anger. "After you practically bankrolled his lifestyle for years, he tries to pull a fast one." "Let's leave the past in the past," I smiled. "From this day forward, I am living solely for myself. I am never wasting another second on people who don't deserve my time." "Amen to that," Sarah yelled. To Hannah's new era. We clinked our glasses again and drank. Life after divorce was entirely different than I had expected. I thought I would be wallowing in depression, crying myself to sleep, but the reality was intoxicatingly freeing. Without Mark, I didn't have to stress about what time he was coming home. I didn't have to walk on eggshells to cater to his moods. I didn't have to surrender my hard-earned paycheck. I completely overhauled my life. First, I hired a contractor and remodeled the Lincoln Park condo. I gutted everything that reminded me of Mark, bought brand new mid-century modern furniture, and repainted the walls a warm sage green. The place felt fresh and new, just like me. Next, I signed up for a boutique yoga studio, going every day after work. It did wonders for my physical and mental health. I also took culinary classes. When Mark was around, I was always forced to cook the heavy, meat and potatoes, American dinners he demanded. Now, I learned to make whatever I craved: Thai, vegan, complex French pastries. I also started using my PTO. I packed my bags and flew to all the places I had always wanted to see, but he had vetoed. I met fascinating people, listened to incredible stories, and realized the world was so much bigger than my failed marriage. There was so much beauty worth living for. 6 months post-divorce, Mark's mother ambushed me outside my office building. "Hannah, please, can't you find it in your heart to forgive Mark? He knows he made a terrible mistake," she pleaded, grabbing my hands with red, tear-streaked eyes. I gently but firmly pulled my hands away. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Evans. I can't. But you were married for 5 years. You had such a deep bond. How can you just throw it all away like this?" she begged. "A relationship cannot be sustained by only one person trying," I said calmly. "Mark cheated on me and tried to steal my life savings. That is a fact. I cannot forgive that. He was just confused for a moment." "That hussy seduced him," she cried defensively. "He already broke it off with her. He wants to come back to you." I let out a cold laugh. "He broke it off with her because the court ordered him to liquidate his assets to pay me out, and now he's practically broke. She left him the second the money dried up." Her face went pale. "I know you're hurting. And I know you pity your son," I said softly, "but please try to respect my boundaries. Mark and I are divorced. There is zero chance of reconciliation. Please do not approach me again." With that, I turned on my heel and walked away. I heard her sobbing on the sidewalk behind me, but I didn't look back. I knew I was being cold, but I didn't regret it. Mark had his chance. He threw it in the garbage. A few months later, a new man transferred into my department at work. His name was Ben Carter. He was the new VP of marketing, a few years older than me, grounded, sharp, and incredibly charismatic. We got to know each other while collaborating on a major Q3 campaign. He was incredibly supportive and constantly went out of his way to mentor me. One evening, after wrapping up a late pitch deck, he asked me out to dinner. "Hannah, I know through the office grapevine that you're divorced," he said bluntly over pasta. I was taken aback by his directness, but I nodded. "Yes. Are you seeing anyone right now?" he asked, locking eyes with me. I shook my head. "No." "Then I'd like to officially ask you out on a date," he said with utter sincerity. "I know it might be too soon, but I really like you. I admire your independence, your grit, your kindness. I want to take care of you, protect you, and build a real home with you." I looked into his earnest eyes and felt a flutter in my chest. But my guard instantly went up, and I shook my head. "I'm so sorry, Ben. I am just not in a place where I'm ready for a new relationship." "I understand," he said softly, not pushing. "Then I'll wait. However long it takes, I'll be here." That night, I sat on my balcony overlooking the Chicago skyline. Maybe someday I would believe in love again, but for right now, the only person I wanted to love was myself. A year later, the final enforcement of the court order went through. Mark was forced to sell the Brooklyn condo, and his lawyers wired me the cash equivalent of my half of the equity, plus the court-ordered penalties. Combined with the $50,000 I had saved from the joint account and my own aggressive saving, I had nearly $250,000 in liquid assets. It was more than enough to give me a massive safety net. I used a chunk of that money to fulfill a lifelong dream. I opened a small, artisanal coffee shop on the ground floor retail space of my condo building. It wasn't massive, but it was cozy, full of exposed brick, hanging plants, and good music. Every morning, I worked the espresso machine, chatting with the neighborhood regulars. In the afternoons, I sat by the front window, reading a novel and soaking in the sunlight. Life became simple and beautiful. One day, Sarah stopped by the shop. "Hannah, looking at you right now, this is the most genuinely happy I've ever seen you," she smiled, sipping her oat milk latte. I smiled back. "I really feel it." "Do you ever have any regrets?" she asked suddenly. I thought about it for a second and shook my head. None. 0 regrets. That marriage put me through hell, but it also forced me to grow a spine. I learned how to protect myself, to stop trusting blindly, and most importantly, how to prioritize my own worth. "Do you think you'll ever trust love again?" I looked at the afternoon sun streaming through the glass storefront and smiled. "Yes. But next time, I'll be much more cautious. More rational. I will never, ever abandon myself for the sake of love again." Sarah nodded approvingly. "You've really changed for the better." Yes, I had. I was no longer the naive, easily manipulated girl in her 20s. I had been forged into an independent, formidable woman who knew exactly what she brought to the table. 2 years after the divorce, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, a familiar figure pushed open the door to my coffee shop. It was Mark. He looked awful. He was haggard, his posture was slumped, and he had visible streaks of gray in his hair. "Hannah," he said, his voice cracking. I looked at him with zero emotion. "Can I help you?" I just came to apologize," he stammered. "I'm so sorry for everything." I didn't say a word. I just stared at him. "I know I did unforgivable things. I destroyed you," he continued, looking at his worn-out shoes. "I regret it every single day of my life. I know it's too late. I just needed to say it to your face." "I'm sorry." "Okay, you said it," I replied flatly. Mark looked taken aback by my ice-cold demeanor. He shook his head slowly. "Then the door is behind you," I said, pointing toward the exit. He looked at me, his eyes brimming with a pathetic bitterness. "Hannah, do you really not even hate me anymore?" I paused, actually considering the question. I used to. I hated you so much, it kept me awake at night dreaming of ways to ruin you. But I don't hate you anymore. I realize that holding on to hate is exhausting. You simply aren't worth the energy. Are you happy now? He asked, his voice hollow. Incredibly happy, I smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. Happier than I ever was a single day I was married to you. That sentence was the final nail in his coffin. He let out a broken, miserable laugh, turned around, and walked out into the Chicago wind. Watching him walk away, I realized that the man I had once loved with desperate, blinding devotion was now nothing more than a complete stranger. Time is a miraculous thing. It is the ultimate healer. My days were now full and peaceful. I woke up, did an hour of yoga, and made a quiet, healthy breakfast. At 9:00 a.m., I opened the coffee shop. For lunch, I threw together something simple, like a caprese sandwich or a salad. In the afternoons, if the rush died down, I sat in my window seat and read. I had recently gotten into behavioral psychology, and it was fascinating. In the evenings, I met up with friends for dinner or watched a movie in my beautiful condo. On weekends, I drove out to Starved Rock State Park for hiking or spent hours wandering the Art Institute of Chicago. Life was quiet, but it was spectacular. And the most crucial part was that I had found myself again. I didn't need to depend on a man for financial or emotional stability. I was navigating the world by my own rules. 6 months ago, Ben asked me out again. Hannah. I've waited 2 years, he said, standing outside my coffee shop in a tailored overcoat. I know you've been through a war, and I'm not here to pressure you. I just wanted to remind you that I'm still here, and I'm still waiting. In that moment, looking at this steady, patient man, I felt that maybe it was safe to lower the drawbridge. Ben, I said softly, I'm willing to give this a try. His face lit up like a kid on Christmas, and he pulled me into a tight, secure hug. Are you serious? I laughed. But I have to be completely honest. I don't know if I love you yet. I'm just willing to date and see where it goes. That is more than enough, he said, pulling back to look at me. I'll prove to you with my actions that I'm worthy of your trust. We had been dating for 3 months now. He was a phenomenal partner, sweet, attentive, and deeply empathetic. He respected my boundaries, championed my small business, and never once tried to bulldoze my opinions. Being with him felt comfortable and breathable. I realized this is what true, healthy love is supposed to feel like. Not a chaotic, anxiety-inducing roller coaster of passion, but a steady, reliable current. Not possession and control, but mutual respect. Not a cage, but a launch pad. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I was willing to bet on it, because I knew that as long as I remained financially independent, emotionally strong, and true to myself, no man could ever destroy me again. A few days ago, I got a random text from a mutual college acquaintance who had kept in touch with Mark. He told me that Mark and Claire had completely imploded. She dumped him the second she realized his assets were frozen and drained by the divorce settlement. Now, Mark was living in a cheap sublet in Queens, struggling to make ends meet. The acquaintance asked if I could possibly loan Mark a few $1,000s to help him get back on his feet. I read the text and actually laughed out loud. I typed back, "Sorry, I can't help you." Then I permanently blocked the number. It wasn't because I was heartless, but because I knew his misery was the direct consequence of his own sociopathic greed. When he was plotting to leave me destitute, did he care if I starved? Now that he hit rock bottom, suddenly I was supposed to play the savior? Sorry, but I am not a recycling bin for toxic men. I am not here to carry anyone's emotional or financial baggage. I am here to love myself and live my beautifully curated life. Last week, I flew out to the East Coast for my college reunion. Everyone was catching up over expensive cocktails, some had made partner at their law firms, some were pregnant with baby number 3, some were currently navigating brutal divorces. When the circle turned to me, I held up my glass and said cheerfully, "I'm happily divorced, I own a thriving coffee shop in Chicago. I have a fantastic new boyfriend, and I have never been better." Everyone looked shocked, and then a chorus of congratulations broke out. One sorority sister asked, "Hannah, do you really not regret the divorce? I mean, you threw away 5 years of history." I shook my head without hesitation. No regrets. If I hadn't filed for divorce, I would have spent my entire life as a prop in a narcissistic lie. The divorce was excruciating, but it allowed me to resurrect myself. "You're incredibly brave," another girl said quietly. "A lot of women in your shoes would have just looked the other way to keep the lifestyle." "We didn't have kids, which made pulling the ripcord a lot easier," I admitted. "But even if we did, I firmly believe that raising a child in a toxic, loveless household does infinitely more damage than a clean break." The women around me nodded in solemn agreement. That night, after a few glasses of champagne, I flew back to Chicago. Standing on my balcony, looking at the glittering city grid, I thought back to the woman I was 3 years ago, the weeping, pathetic girl waving goodbye at O'Hare Airport. In that moment, I genuinely believed my universe was ending. But here I am, standing in the sunlight of a life that is entirely mine. I proved to myself that a woman doesn't need a man to build a masterpiece of a life. Today, a very specific customer walked into the shop. She was young, maybe early 20s, wearing a local university sweatshirt. She ordered an iced latte, sat in the far corner, and quietly began to cry. I grabbed a napkin, walked over, and gently placed it on her table. "Do you need a tissue?" She looked up, her eyes bloodshot. "Thank you." I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "If you don't mind me asking, do you want to vent?" She hesitated, tearing off a piece of the napkin, then nodded. It turned out she had just found out her long-term boyfriend was sleeping with a coworker. She was paralyzed, she didn't know whether to forgive him or pack her bags. "He swears it was just a one-time drunken mistake, that he still loves me," she sobbed into her hands, "but I feel so betrayed. I feel like I'm losing my mind." Looking at her was like looking in a time machine. "Listen to me," I said, leaning in with absolute conviction. "There is no such thing as just a one-time mistake when it comes to cheating. It is a conscious series of decisions. It is either 0 times, or it is countless times. If you forgive him now, you are teaching him that he can disrespect you and get away with it. And a man who truly loves you would never, ever risk shattering you like this. But we've been together for 3 years. I don't want to throw all that time in the garbage," she cried. 3 years is a sunk cost," I said gently. "If this relationship is actively destroying your peace, it is not an investment worth holding on to. You have to learn how to aggressively respect yourself. Do not waste the best years of your life trying to fix a man who doesn't respect you." She looked at me, tears welling in her eyes, but a flicker of clarity cut through the grief. "You're right. I know exactly what I have to do." I smiled warmly. "Good for you. You are going to find someone so much better. But first, you're going to find yourself." Watching her walk out the door with her shoulders pulled back, I suddenly felt that my trauma had a purpose. Maybe that is the entire point of surviving something terrible. It forces you to level up. And gives you the exact blueprint to help pull other women out of the trenches. 3 months later, I was closing out the cash register on a rainy Tuesday evening when my cell phone rang. It was an unknown out-of-state number. I answered, and a stern female voice came through the speaker. "Am I speaking with Miss Hannah Miller?" "Yes, speaking. This is Special Agent Chen with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, New York Field Office," the voice said. "We are contacting you regarding a situation involving your ex-husband, Mark Evans." My stomach dropped. What happened? Mr. Evans was taken into federal custody this morning on charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and securities fraud, Agent Chen stated flatly. "According to our ongoing investigation, he has been operating a sophisticated Ponzi scheme through his corporate entity for the last 3 years, defrauding investors out of over $20 million. I stood paralyzed behind the counter. Furthermore, Agent Chen continued, prior to his arrest, he left a written statement instructing us to contact you. In his confession, he alleges that the initial seed money he used to establish his New York shell company and purchase the Brooklyn real estate was commingled with illicit funds. The Department of Justice is moving to seize all assets tied to his LLC, and because of your prior marital ties, we need to formally interview you to rule out your involvement. My hand began to shake. Additionally, she paused, Mr. Evans stated on the record that he never actually loved you and that his sole motivation for marrying you was to gain access to a dual-income credit line to fund his initial fraudulent investments. The agent kept talking, explaining grand jury subpoenas and asset forfeiture protocols, but the room was ringing. I looked down at my phone screen and saw another call coming in. The caller ID flashed, Ben. I took a deep breath, interrupting the agent. I understand. I will have my attorney contact your office tomorrow morning. I hung up, but before I could even tap Ben's name, the heavy glass door of the coffee shop violently swung open. A large, furious-looking man stormed in, his eyes darting around until they locked onto me. Hannah Miller! He bellowed. I'm one of Mark Evans's investors. Your scumbag husband stole my life savings, and you are going to pay me back every single dime. I gripped the edge of the counter, forcing my spine straight. The last two customers in the shop jumped out of their seats. Sir, I need you to step back and calm down, I commanded, projecting my voice so it didn't shake. Mark and I have been legally divorced for years. Whatever debts he owes you have absolutely nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with you? He sneered, slamming his hand on the pastry case. You were his wife. Do you not understand how marital debt works in this country? Mark owes me $5 million, and if he's going to federal prison, I am coming after you. Then you better have a promissory note with my signature on it, I shot back. My adrenaline spiking. And you better have proof that those funds were deposited into a joint account during our legal marriage and used for our mutual benefit. Because if you don't, I don't owe you a damn thing, and my lawyers will bury you in harassment suits. The man blinked, momentarily thrown off by my total lack of intimidation. He clearly expected a weeping, terrified housewife. Just then, the door swung open again and Ben rushed in, his umbrella dripping wet. He must have been worried when I sent his call to voicemail. Hannah, is everything okay? Ben assessed the situation instantly and stepped directly between me and the angry man, squaring his shoulders. Sir, I don't know who you are, but you need to back away from her right now. And who the hell are you? The man spat. I'm her boyfriend, Ben said, his voice dangerously low. If you have a civil dispute regarding a debt, you take it to the courts. But if you take one more step toward her, I am calling the Chicago Police Department and having you arrested for trespassing and menacing. The man looked at Ben, then glared at the other customers who had already pulled out their phones to record. He scoffed, pointing a thick finger at me. Fine. I'll see you in court, lady. He shoved past Ben and stormed out into the rain. Ben immediately locked the deadbolt and wrapped his arms around me. Oh my God, you must have been terrified. I melted into his chest, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had put on a brave face. But I was trembling. I'm so glad you walked in, I whispered into his coat. I've got you. I told you I'd protect you, he murmured, kissing the top of my head. What was that lunatic talking about? What debt? I pulled back and told him everything about the FBI call. When I finished, Ben's jaw was clenched in pure disgust. That absolute sociopath. What else has he destroyed? I have no idea, I sighed, rubbing my temples. I thought the divorce severed the cancer. I never expected this. Hey, look at me, Ben framed my face with his hands. Tomorrow morning, we are going straight to your lawyer's office. You are legally divorced, and the assets were partitioned by a judge. His federal crimes are his problem, not yours. You are safe. I nodded, but a dark knot of anxiety twisted in my gut. That night, I tossed and turned. The FBI agent's words echoed in the dark. He never loved you. His sole motivation was to gain access to a dual-income credit line. The betrayal ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. From the very first date, I was nothing but a pawn in his psychotic financial scheme. First thing the next morning, Ben drove me to Miss Davis's firm. After reviewing the facts, she let out a reassuring sigh and tapped her pen on the desk. Miss Miller, you can take a breath. You are legally bulletproof here. First, Illinois is an equitable distribution state, but your divorce decree finalized the complete severance of your financial ties, years before these specific federal indictments were handed down. Second, under the law, any debts incurred by one spouse solely in their own name, especially for criminal enterprises or fraudulent businesses, do not attach to the innocent spouse. Unless this man can prove you co-signed a loan or actively participated in the Ponzi scheme, he cannot pierce your corporate or personal veil. And what about the $5 million that guy was screaming about? I asked. He's desperate and trying to intimidate you into a settlement, Miss Davis scoffed. He has no legal standing. As for the FBI trying to claw back the Brooklyn condo money, since the judge awarded you that money as a legal settlement prior to the DOJ's forfeiture action, you are protected under the bona fide purchaser for value defense. You were a third party who received those funds via a court order, completely unaware of the underlying fraud. Your assets are secure. Hearing her lay out the law, the crushing weight finally lifted off my chest. However, Miss Davis cautioned, prepare yourself. A $20 million federal fraud case makes headlines. More desperate creditors might try to track you down. Keep your divorce decree handy, and if anyone sets foot in your business to harass you, you call 911 immediately and let the police handle it. I will. Thank you, Miss Davis. Walking out of the sleek high-rise, Ben grabbed my hand and squeezed it tightly. See? I told you. You have nothing to be afraid of. I'm right here. Looking up at him, a profound wave of warmth washed through my entire body. In the following weeks, a few more people showed up at the coffee shop, claiming to be Mark's victims. Some waved printed emails, others flashed wire transfer receipts. They all demanded that I liquidate my business to make them whole. Following Miss Davis's strict instructions, I coldly demanded they produce a legally binding contract with my signature on it. When they couldn't, Ben, who had temporarily moved his laptop into the shop to work remotely, would step in and firmly ask them to leave before the police arrived. I documented every interaction and forwarded the security footage to my lawyer. Eventually, word got around that harassing the ex-wife was a legal dead end, and the agitators disappeared. Ben saw the toll the stress was taking on me. Hannah, why don't we relocate the shop to a different neighborhood? Or just close down for a month, take a vacation, and let the FBI handle the fallout? I shook my head, my jaw set. No. I am not letting Mark Evans's catastrophic failures dictate my life anymore. I built this business with my own two hands. I'm not running. But. No buts, I said fiercely. He destroyed me once. I am never giving him the power to disrupt my peace again. Ben looked at me, his eyes softening with deep, undeniable admiration. All right. I've got your back. Just promise me if it gets to be too much. You'll let me carry the weight. I promise. A month later, the U.S. Attorney's Office officially cleared me. The federal indictment came down, confirming Mark was the sole architect of the wire fraud and embezzlement ring. He was facing decades in federal prison. The SEC and FBI formally classified me as a victim of his financial abuse, meaning the money I won in the divorce was permanently shielded from government seizure. I could finally breathe. Miss Davis issued a cease and desist letter to the remaining aggressive creditors, legally neutralizing them. My coffee shop returned to its cozy, bustling normalcy, and my life got back on track. But the ordeal taught me a brutal lesson. I used to think a divorce was a clean, surgical cut, but the past always finds a way to bleed into the present. You can never let your guard down. Late one night, the FBI field office called me again. Miss Miller, Mr. Evans has requested a monitored phone call with you from the Federal Detention Center. Do you consent to receive the call? I hesitated, for a fraction of a second. Put him through. A pre-recorded voice announced the call was coming from a federal correctional facility, followed by Mark's voice. It sounded hollow, raspy, and utterly defeated. Hannah. I'm listening, I said, my tone completely devoid of emotion. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know I ruined everything. I did monstrous things. I stayed silent, letting him drown in the quiet. The truth is, I did target you from the beginning, he confessed, his voice breaking. I saw how trusting you were. I saw your stable agency job, your pristine credit score. I manipulated you into the joint account so I could leverage your income to float my early investments. I wanted to use you. I felt a sharp prick in my chest. I had already deduced it, but hearing him admit he was a literal sociopath still stung. I thought I was a genius, he cried. I thought I could make millions on Wall Street and eventually give you a life of luxury. But the market turned, and I got greedy. I started robbing Peter to pay Paul. I never should have started the Ponzi scheme. And what about Claire? I asked coldly. Claire. He let out a dry, hacking laugh. She was in on the grift. She thought I was a whale. She was only with me for the penthouse and the Hamptons rentals. The second the feds raided the office and froze the accounts, she flipped and gave the FBI everything. She immunity bargained her way out of a cell. I closed my eyes and took a deep, centering breath. Hannah, I know apologizing is useless now. Mark wept. I just want you to know. Even though it started as a transaction, somewhere along the line during those 5 years, I actually fell deeply in love with you. But my ego and my greed destroyed the only real thing I ever had. I opened my eyes and stared out the window at the Chicago streetlights. Mark, do you know what I resent the most? It isn't that you stole my money, it's that you weaponized my empathy. For 5 years, I made you the center of my universe. I trusted you implicitly. And you looked at me and saw nothing but a human ATM. I know, he sobbed. But honestly? I want to thank you, I said, my voice ringing with absolute clarity. Thank you for showing me exactly who you are, so I could cut my losses. If you hadn't been so sloppy, I might have spent my entire life being your naive, obedient victim. Hannah, please, this might be the last time we ever speak. It is the last time, I interrupted. We are done. I hope you spend the next 20 years in federal prison reflecting on the lives you ruined. Goodbye, Mark. I hung up, blocked the DOJ routing number, and dropped my phone on the sofa. I sat there in the dark, emotionally drained. Ben came out of the bedroom and sat next to me, wrapping a heavy blanket over my shoulders. Are you okay? I shook my head. I'm not sad. I just feel regret. Regret that I wasted my 20s on someone so utterly devoid of humanity. But I don't regret the trial by fire. It burned away the weak parts of me. Ben took my hand and kissed my knuckles. Do you know what I admire most about you, Hannah? Your absolute titanium resilience. You walked through hell, and you didn't let it turn you bitter. You let it make you fierce. I looked at him, my heart overflowing with a profound, grounding warmth. Thank you for standing in the fire with me, Ben. I don't think I could have weathered this last storm without you. Don't be ridiculous. We're a team, he said softly. And honestly, I should be thanking you. You gave me the privilege of loving you. We stayed up for hours that night, talking about everything: the past, the nightmare we just survived, and our future. Ben told me he wanted to marry me, to build a real family. I told him that for the first time in a very long time, I was ready. I didn't need him to save me, and he didn't view me as a broken bird. We were equals. I finally understood that this was what true love was. It wasn't a toxic, manipulative game of chess. It was absolute transparency. It wasn't demanding someone shrink themselves to fit your ego. It was standing shoulder to shoulder against the world. 6 months later, the coffee shop was bringing in record profits. I hired 2 full-time employees, Chloe, a bright-eyed local college student, and Maria, a hard-working mom in her 40s. Chloe was a whiz at latte art, and Maria kept the operations running like a well-oiled machine. With their help, I finally had the luxury of free time. I bought a DSLR camera and took up street photography, capturing the raw, beautiful energy of Chicago. I also started writing. I typed up essays about my experience with financial abuse, divorce, and rebuilding from scratch, submitting them to various women's lifestyle magazines and digital publications. To my shock, several were published. I started receiving hundreds of emails from readers, women who were trapped in toxic marriages, women who were being financially manipulated by their partners, women who felt utterly paralyzed. I replied to as many as I could. I told them that walking away from a man who doesn't respect you isn't a failure, it is a resurrection. I told them that a woman doesn't need a ring on her finger to have a spectacular, fulfilling life. I told them that to find real happiness, you must ruthlessly enforce your own boundaries. Last winter, Ben took me on a weekend trip to a secluded cabin on Lake Michigan. The Chicago winter was brutal, the wind whipping off the gray water, but wrapped in his coat, I was perfectly warm. We walked along the rocky shoreline, our footprints tracing the edge of the surf. Suddenly, Ben stopped and turned to face me. "I have something I need to ask you." "What is it?" I smiled, pulling my scarf up against the wind. He dropped to one knee on the freezing sand, pulled a small velvet box from his coat pocket, and opened it. Inside sat a stunning, ethically sourced diamond ring. "Hannah Miller, will you marry me?" he asked, looking up at me with unwavering devotion. "I know your first marriage was a war zone. I know you've had to build armor around your heart. But I swear to you, on my life, I am not Mark. I will spend every single day of the rest of my life protecting you, uplifting you, and making sure you know your exact worth. I will never lie to you. I will never manipulate you. I just want the honor of walking beside you." Tears hot, happy tears spilled over my eyelashes. "Ben." My voice cracked. "If you need more time, I will stay right here," he said, the wind ruffling his hair. "I'll wait as long as it takes." I furiously shook my head and laughed through my tears. "You don't have to wait another second." "Yes. Absolutely. Yes." He jumped up, slid the ring onto my freezing finger, and picked me up, spinning me around in the freezing wind. The lake roared beside us, but grounded in his arms, I felt anchored. We were two strong trees with intertwined roots, impossible to tear down. Our wedding was intimate and understated. We rented out a beautiful greenhouse conservatory in the city and invited only our closest family and friends. No massive ballroom, no six-figure budget, just genuine, overwhelming joy. My mother held my hands in the bridal suite, her eyes shining with happy tears. "Hannah, it makes my heart so full to see you this radiant." "I finally got it right, Mom," I smiled. "Ben is an incredible man. You hold on to him," she whispered. At the altar, Ben read his vows from a small leather notebook. "Hannah, thank you for trusting me enough to let me in. I promise to be your safest place, your biggest fan, and your absolute equal." Looking at him, my heart felt completely whole. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had made the right choice. Married life with Ben was a revelation of peace. He was a true partner. If I was exhausted after a long day at the shop, he cooked dinner and poured the wine. If he was stressed from a corporate board meeting, I rubbed his shoulders and listened. He never once implied I should sell my business to be a traditional housewife. In fact, he regularly helped me balance the shop's profit and loss spreadsheets on Sunday mornings. We built our empire together. This spring, I found out I was pregnant. I was terrified and ecstatic all at once. Thrilled to finally become a mother, but anxious about whether I was ready to raise a human being. Ben was over the moon. He immediately switched to decaf and solidarity, cooked me nutrient-dense meals, and bought an entire library of parenting books, reading them cover to cover with a highlighter. "Who do you think the baby will look like?" he asked one night, resting his hand on my slightly rounded stomach. "I hope he gets your eyes," I laughed. "I hope she gets your absolute fearlessness," he countered, kissing my forehead. The pregnancy was physically demanding, but I was bathed in a profound sense of security. I knew this child was being brought into a home built on an unshakable foundation of respect. During my second trimester, an unexpected letter arrived in my mailbox. The return address was from Ohio. It was from Mark's mother. I opened it cautiously. Inside, her handwriting was shaky. She formally apologized to me. She wrote that she was deeply ashamed of the monster her son had become and apologized for begging me to forgive him back when I was just trying to survive. She mentioned that Mark was currently serving a 12-year sentence in a minimum security federal camp and that he was working in the prison laundry, trying to reform himself. She ended the letter by saying she had seen a recent article I published online and that she genuinely wished me a lifetime of happiness. Reading it, I felt a strange sense of closure. I didn't hold any animosity toward his mother. She was a victim, too, a mother who raised a son. Having no idea he would grow up to defraud millions and destroy his own life. I wrote her a brief, polite response, telling her I had forgiven the past, that I was happily remarried, and that she shouldn't carry her son's sins on her conscience. I truly hoped Mark would use his decade behind bars to become someone who wasn't a danger to society. When I dropped that envelope in the mailbox, the very last invisible tether to my past dissolved. I had genuinely let it all go. Last autumn, our daughter was born. A beautiful, screaming, perfect little girl. We named her Clara. Holding her in the hospital bed, I looked down at her tiny, grasping fingers. I want her to grow up in a world where she is unequivocally loved. But more importantly, I want her to grow up equipped to survive. I will teach her everything I learned the hard way. I will teach her how to protect her assets, how to trust her gut, and how to spot a lie. I will teach her that a woman can be incredibly kind without being a doormat, and deeply loving while still guarding her independence. Now, my life is exactly what I always manifested. I wake up, nurse Clara, and play with her on the living room rug. When she goes down for her nap, I hop on my laptop to manage the coffee shop's payroll and write my weekly column. I never gave up my career for motherhood. Ben is my ultimate co-parent, splitting the mental and physical load 50/50. Always reminding me that my ambitions are just as vital to our family as his. Last month, I hosted a special after-hours event at the coffee shop. I invited women from my online community who were navigating divorce, infidelity, or financial abuse to come together in a safe space. The room was packed. Some women were freshly separated, still raw and weeping. Some were on the fence, terrified of the financial ruin of leaving. And some were veterans on the other side, thriving in their second acts. I stood at the front of the room, holding a microphone, and shared my story. I told them about the $50,000, the private investigator, the FBI, and the ultimate triumph of walking away. Leaving a man who uses you is not a tragedy, it is a jailbreak, I told the silent, captivated room. I know it feels like you are stepping off a cliff in the dark. I know it hurts. But I promise you, if you take that terrifying step, you will find a version of yourself you didn't even know existed waiting for you at the bottom. But I'm so scared, a woman in the back row cried softly. I'm terrified of being alone. Being alone in a quiet apartment is 1,000,000 times better than being lonely in a king-sized bed next to a man who doesn't value you, I replied firmly. And who says being divorced means you're alone? You have your friends, your career, your passions. And when you are whole, you will attract a love that actually elevates you. Are you truly happy now? Another woman asked. I glanced toward the back of the shop. Ben was standing by the espresso machine, bouncing a giggling Clara on his hip, beaming at me with total adoration. I am happier than I ever thought was legally allowed, I smiled, my eyes locking with his. After the event, dozens of women hugged me, thanking me for giving them the courage to finally call a lawyer or check their bank statements. I realized that my darkest trauma had been transmuted into my greatest superpower. This year marks the 5th anniversary of my divorce. In 5 years, I evolved from a dependent, gaslit girl into an absolute force of nature. I went from being the victim of a federal fraudster to a successful entrepreneur, a mentor, a fiercely loved wife, and a mother. And every single bit of it traces back to that one brutal afternoon when I decided to stop being a victim, walked into Chase Bank, and took my power back. Last week, I was the keynote speaker at a women's financial independence seminar in downtown Chicago. The auditorium was packed with hundreds of professionals. When I stepped up to the podium, I looked out at the crowd. 5 years ago, I filed for a contested divorce. At the time, people whispered that I was being vindictive, that I was acting on impulse, that I would regret tearing up my life over an affair. But today, standing here, I can confidently tell you that pulling the plug on that marriage was the greatest, most profitable decision of my entire life. The crowd broke into applause. Divorce didn't break me, it introduced me to myself, I continued, my voice echoing through the hall. In my first marriage, I outsourced my financial security and my self-worth to a man, confusing sacrifice with love. I learned the hard way that a love built on the erasure of your own identity is a house of cards. I leaned into the microphone. So, to every woman in this room, whether you are single, dating, or married for 20 years, never, ever lose your autonomy. You can love a partner deeply, but you must love yourself ferociously. Keep your own bank account. Know where the money is. Keep your career sharp. Because only when you are completely financially and emotionally independent are you truly free to choose who gets the privilege of standing beside you. The auditorium erupted into a standing ovation. Late last night, Clara spoke her very first word. Sitting on the living room rug, she looked up at me, clapped her pudgy hands, and babbled, "Mama." I burst into tears of pure joy, scooping her into my arms. I buried my face in her soft hair and made a silent vow. My sweet girl, Mama will always protect you. I will raise you to be a woman who is fierce, intelligent, and unshakable. Ben walked out of the kitchen, saw us crying, and immediately wrapped his massive arms around both of us, kissing my cheek. "We've got her." "Together," he whispered. I leaned my head against his chest, looking at our daughter, my heart so full it felt like it might burst. This is the American dream I fought for. A partner who respects me, a brilliant daughter, a thriving business, and absolute peace of mind. I no longer need to look to anyone else for salvation. I am the architect of my own life, and I play by my own rules.